Dr. Santos, thank you for being here today. Please tell us about who you are. What department are you in? What is the position you hold? And how long have you been with San Francisco State University?
Hello, my name is Maricel Santos, and I'm an associate professor of English here at San Francisco State University. I teach in a graduate program called TESOL, Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages, and I also coordinate a certificate program in immigrant literacies, which is a unique academic program that combines community service work with the study of literacy. I've been here since 2005, so for about 8 years.
Professor, what are your interests? Please describe the critical issues in education that motivate you and the impact those issues have had on your work.
So I'm an adult ESL teacher and a literacy researcher, and my preoccupation as a researcher is language. Specifically, what kind of language should we be giving our adult ESL learners so that they can thrive in educational environments? When you think about the kind of language you need to be able to control in order to excel not only in content areas like biology and history, but also the kinds of skills you need to be able to write effectively and organize your ideas, that there's an enormous breadth of language that we are expecting our students to learn, and in the case of many adults, to be able to learn in a very short time. So one of the most critical issues I see in educational research as it relates to adult English language learners is, are we doing a good enough job of providing them with very rich opportunities to develop the language and literacy skills that they need in order to be successful in these educational environments? But I think of these routes to success in two ways. One, if you think about the kind of knowledge you need to be able to understand a sentence like, teacher quality explains a significant amount of the variation in student achievement. You're all educators, you have content expertise. When I say teacher quality, a lot of words start popping up in your head because you know what that means, not in a lay kind of way, but in a very content expert kind of way. The idea or the phrase explains a significant amount is also important vocabulary in this sentence because it conveys a certain academic tone, it conveys a certain academic discourse. And we have to ask ourselves, how do we learn to talk like that? How do we learn to write like that? One theory is that you read a lot of texts that use that kind of language, and therefore you're exposed to it, and therefore can then integrate it into your own repertoire. Another route to access is that you hang around with people who also use that language and have people who can apprentice that kind of language development, model it for you. You can try it out around them. They may be able to support that development in that way, in a very social way. And those are two areas that I think are very important when you think about studying changes in literacy skill, changes in language, that it's not just the accrual of skills, the accrual of vocabulary, but it's also the ways that learning new language also is changing the way you interact with others. And one way that we talk about this is that literacy as skill and literacy as social practice are extremely important. And I think one of the most critical issues in educational research is that we probably have given too much emphasis to the former and not enough to the latter. And I encourage educators to integrate into their research when they're looking at the development and the success of English language learners. Are we attending to the skills they need? Are we also attending to the kinds of practices we want them to be able to demonstrate, but also the social opportunities they have along the way to be able to enrich both routes to success in a second language and in an academic environment?
Dr. Santos, can you please take a moment and tell us about the research methodologies that you have used and why?
Because I'm interested in both language as the development of skills and also language as the development of social practices and the social processes that evolve as someone is developing those skills, it's very important for me to be able to use a whole array of ethnographic tools, including classroom observation, interviews, focus groups with learners, to get at both what they look like they're doing in the classrooms and getting also their perceptions of what that feels like for them. It's also important for me to have to be able to use tools that look very closely at talk. So a whole menu of methods around discourse analysis, conversational analysis, methods that look closely at the talk that is taking place that organizes interaction. So if I say, who's going to go first in this activity? That's a kind of language that sometimes small talk that English language learners haven't learned quite yet when they learn things like what's your name. So being able to have tools that look at the talk that students are using during tasks makes videography, audio taping, up-close observation protocols very important to understanding the processes that are unfolding as literacy skills and practices take shape.
Professor, what is your experience working with doctoral students? What types of roles have you performed in the EDD program, such as teacher, chair, member of committee?
So I've taught a few classes in this program. I've taught the class on English language learners and also an introductory seminar on graduate level writing, which is great because it gets me to meet you as a writer, not just as an expert on an area of educational research. But the reason I very much enjoy working with doctoral students on their dissertations, in fact, reflects my research interests as I talked about earlier, in looking at literacy as both an achievement of skill, but also an achievement of social interaction, of social practice. And this stems from when I work with doctoral students, obviously the thesis, the creation of this thesis, the production of the thesis is preeminent. I mean, that is the goal. But along the way, we are having lots of conversations. Some feel very large when you make big decisions about methods. Some feel very small because you're just trying to understand, well, what is this one particular number? How should I interpret it? How should I interpret this interview comment that I have in my data? And even though there's a spectrum of small conversations versus large conversations, it's all part of the evolving talk that we are carrying out about your thesis. There's a wonderful quotation from David Olson, who's a literacy researcher. And he says, talk about texts is as important as the texts themselves. And that is so important when it comes to your relationship with your doctoral advisor, which is finding someone who you feel you can learn from through conversation. Because obviously you are gaining some incredible research skills, research writing skills, analytic skills by way of this dissertation, but you're also gaining a whole social repertoire of how to interact with others about work you care a lot about. And so I look forward to engaging with students and hearing the kind of talk that they will be sharing about their theses. And through that, I think that's where the seeds of really great relationships between advisees and advisors come about.